Welcome and welcome back to Natalie and Company. I am Natalie and you are the company that I do like to keep sometimes. And this is my fall TBR. This fall TBR is filled with anything dark, intense, mysterious, and weird. A majority of them are classics actually. I don't know what it is about fall, but it just makes me want to pick up a good classic. It makes me want to pick up something that's lasted, something that has history and age. These are books that I feel deal with death, dark themes, cold weather, and intense emotions, because to me that's kind of like the summary of fall, like melancholy and passion in equal measure, you know what I mean? Getting into it, shall we? This first book that I have is the only reread on the list, but I have a feeling that this book is just going to be permanently on my fall TBR for every year, no matter or not like when the last time that I read it was, just because it's just so good and I just cannot imagine myself not ever always wanting to reread it. And that book is House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. As you can see, she has been well loved. House of Leaves is the story of a couple who move into a house. Once they get into this house, they realize that the inside is larger than the outside. Like mathematically, they measure the room and it's like 1/4 of an inch larger on the inside. And then suddenly, one day, a door shows up on the inside of their house. This door, though, is on the outside wall. It should theoretically open up and lead to outside. But instead, when you open up this door, it leads into a vast and dark labyrinth. The Davidson family is recording these scenes in almost a found footage way. Oh my god, just chills. Chills. So good. So entirely good. I love weird books. I love books that are just abnormal and that do a good job at proving their themes through their weirdness. There's a purpose to the weirdness. It's not just like, oh, there's weird. Like, it has meaning, it has symbolism, it has, like, you know, all of those kinds of things. Everything in this book, oh my god, it's so good. Just everything that has to do with this book. I loved it. And it became one of my favorites because this is a wholly unique reading experience. Like, I definitely don't think it's a book for everybody. I don't think that everybody's gonna want to pick it up, gonna want to sit through all of these crazy ramblings that are in here. Not everybody is going to enjoy that, and that's fine. But if you are somebody that has been reading for a really long time and you want a wholly and entirely unique reading experience, here it is. I think it's so worth the read, even if you have a difficult time or even if it's hard, because it does such a good job at showing you its themes, at making you think and ponder in a way like a philosophy book might even. Like, I think that this is genius. And now that I like know the story of it, I'm so looking forward to rereading it again. I just feel like this is the kind of book that can evolve with you as you grow as a person, as you learn and get older. The meaning, the experience of this book can also evolve and change along with you because of how well all of the differing pieces and parts are put together here. I love the way that it talks about space. I love the way that it talks about emptiness. I love the way that it talks about labyrinths and men and relationships and the self and solitude, and like there's just, I mean, obviously it's a big book, it can be so much in it, but this is where there's just so much in it that is done well, is put together well. All of the pieces have purpose and it's so good. Okay, I can't give you as much detail about any of these other books. I haven't read any of the ones left on this TBR, so let's just go through them, shall we? The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I've never read anything by Donna Tartt. The Goldfinch seems really intimidating to me, even though I just showed you House of Leaves. The Goldfinch seems just so entirely undoable to me. And I also think that the subject matter in The Secret History will be a little bit more engaging and entertaining for me. The summary here does a good job. Under the influence of their charismatic classics professor, a group of clever, eccentric misfits at a New England college discover a way of thinking and living that is a world away from the humdrum existence of their contemporaries. But when they go beyond the boundaries of normal morality, they slip gradually from obsession to corruption and betrayal, and at last, inexorably, into evil. Evil. I know that there is death somewhere in this book. I know that there is fine art. I know that it is the classic dark academia. I literally did not know that this book was written in like 1992. This book is so beautifully floppy. It's like gonna be so nice to read. I think it's time. I think it's time I finally read this. I haven't been big into dark academia in general. I own Babel and I read If We Were Villains. I did think If We Were Villains was fun if you didn't take it too seriously. I feel like some people took it too seriously and was like, this is so pretentious. But to me it read like a goofy thriller because it was just like, oh, Shakespeare. And I thought it was fun because of that. So let's just go straight into the dark academia world and read the original. Next, we have one that I still haven't picked up, even though every year I say I'm gonna read it. It is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Dorian Gray, decadent archetype anti-hero of Oscar Wilde's only novel, an underground classic which scandalized society upon its publication in 1890. Dorian Gray, the debauched libertine who retains a veneer of eternal youth during decades of increasingly outlandish vice, depravity, and corruption, while his portrait ages and rots in an attic. I obviously know kind of what happens in here. The artist is the creator of the preface to the 1891 edition. The artist is the creator of beautiful things. To reveal art and conceal the artist is art's aim. The critic is he who can translate into another manner or a new material his impression of beautiful things. No artist has ethical sympathies. An ethical sympathy in an artist is an unpardonable mannerism of style. The Picture of Dorian Gray, the painting, ages. He does not. The fact that I haven't read this is criminal to me. Next, we have one of the 3 short story collections that I have on this list. We have Talk to Me, anthology of Arctic horror stories. And these are all horror stories from natives of the Arctic, and they write their own horror stories. Talk to Me is an Inuktitut word that means in the dark. So that is mostly themed around darkness, and I'm really looking forward to this one. 9 stories. Last year I read, the only short story collection that I ended up reading was The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, and it was like a bit of a disappointment. I didn't really like it as much as I thought that I was going to. So here's fingers crossed that I have better luck with some of the short stories that I have on this list today. Next, we have Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. I gotta have a vampire book on my TBR every year. I just think it feels empty without one, and I've really been wanting to read Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice, and I am just super looking forward to it. There is a person that has wandered into a bar, has met a vampire, and the vampire decides to give him basically an interview of his entire life and goes through all of these stories, and I've just heard that it's amazing, and look at how beautiful she is. Of course you would write a vampire wonderfully. So this one's pretty self-explanatory why I would be reading it for fall. Makes me want to watch Lost Boys, honestly. If you've never seen that movie, that's like one of my favorite vampire movies. One of my favorite like things about vampires of all time is Lost Boys. So go ahead and check that one out. Next, we have The Aleph and Other Stories by Jorge Luis Borges. Weirdness. Everybody says that the weirdness in House of Leaves is very Borgesian, and I need to see what everybody's talking about because I do love me a good weird story. Full of philosophical puzzles and supernatural surprises, these stories contain some of Borges's most fully realized human characters. I recently found out that Borges like lost his sight like later in life. I was just looking up and doing research on disabled authors, and he completely lost his sight and had to dictate his stories. And I just thought that was so interesting. I want to read it. And the other Penguin classics and the final short story collection I have on this list is Dark Tales by Shirley Jackson, Penguin Classics copy. The Lottery is one of my favorite short stories of all time. We Who Have Always Lived in the Castle is amazing. A Haunting of Hill House is amazing. Like, I'm beginning to feel like Shirley Jackson is like nestling her way in to becoming like one of my all-time favorite authors. And I found this at the bookstore that I work at, and one, love the cover, and two, there are short stories in here that I've never read. But the funny thing is right after I bought this copy of The Lottery showed up in the store, like a new copy of it, and I literally am in love with the design. Like, what the fuck, that's so good. And I want it on my shelf, but I just bought this one. So maybe I'm thinking I need to read this before I'm able to buy that. This collection of classics and newly reprinted stories provides readers with more of her unsettling tales, including The Possibility of Evil and The Summer People. In these deliciously dark stories, the daily commute turns into a nightmarish game of hide and seek. The loving wife hides homicidal thoughts, and the concerned citizen might just be an infamous serial killer. In the haunting world of Shirley Jackson, nothing is as it seems and nowhere is safe. From the city streets to the crumbling country pile, from the small town apartment to the dark, dark woods, there's something sinister in suburbia. Good! I love her! So smart. Such a brilliant woman. Oh, and the introduction is by Tisha Mosvik. Next. Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bukharov. Which I love this cover, by the way. Great cover design. One spring after, I like actually legitimately don't know what this is about other than like it is like kind of dark. Let's read the summary for the first time together, shall we? One spring afternoon, the devil, trailing fire and chaos in his wake, weaves himself out of the shadows and into Moscow. Mikhail Bukharov's fantastical, funny, and devastating satire of Soviet life combines two distinct yet interwoven parts, one set in contemporary Moscow, the other in ancient Jerusalem, each brimming with historical, imaginary, frightful, and wonderful characters. Written during the darkest days of Stalin's reign, and finally published in 1966 and 1967, The Master and Margarita became a literary phenomenon, signaling artistic and spiritual freedom for Russians everywhere. What is scarier than fascism in all reality? You know? Next is probably the one that I'm least likely to pick up, but that I am determined to read one day. The Monk by Matthew Lewis. This is the first ever horror novel ever written in English. In 1796, so about 60 years before Frankenstein was written, Matthew Lewis wrote The Monk, which is the story of a monk who, despite being very, very devout for the majority of his life, falls into sin, begins to have an affair, does all of these horrible things, and it's about his descent into depravity. And the book was so controversial when it came out because of its very graphic, at the time, depictions of these very sinful acts and these very looked down upon things. And so Lewis's extraordinary tale draws on folklore, legendary ghost stories, and contemporary dread inspired by the terrors of the French Revolution. Its excesses... I told you, what's scarier than fascism? Nothing! Its excesses shocked the reading public, and it was condemned as obscene. The novel continued to beguile and unnerve readers today with its gruesome catalog of iniquities, while at the same time giving a profound insight into the deep anxieties experienced by British citizens during one of the most turbulent periods in the nation's history. Wow, he was only like 20 years old when he wrote this. So, I want to read it, in case you couldn't tell by the fact that it is on my TBR. Yeah, thanks. We have Out of the Cage by Fernanda Garcia Lau. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month, by the way. Out of the Cage opens in 1956 in Argentina with the freakish death of Aurora Barrow and descends into a dark philosophical exploration of humanity and mortality. In the midst of her family's celebration of a national holiday, an LP careening through the air like a demented boomerang severs her jugular. Her family, an agglomeration of perversions, deformities, and obsessions, seems at first not to notice. Singing on, Aurora is left behind in a voyeuristic limbo as an omniscient first-person narrator to observe the depravity of her family and reflect on the farce of her life and human existence. She's a ghost. She dies, and then she's a ghost, and she sees the wacky things that her family does. A tragic comedy. Macabre and fantastic vaudeville. I know very little about this book because I found it in a book box, but it sounds really, really interesting, so I want to read it. Next, we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is the story, because I've seen the movie, of a woman who marries a man and then goes to the man's house to begin spending their life together, and she finds remnants of his dead wife everywhere, all throughout the house. And it is like this blurring of reality of, is she actually haunting the building? Did he do anything to harm her? Is that why she's gone? Or even at the most basic terms, does he even love her despite the fact that he's married her, when it seems he's so hung up on his dead wife? It really devolves from that. I'm not doing it justice. Daphne du Maurier is, of course, a phenomenal author. My friend read this one and she said it was dense to get into, but then by the end it is totally and completely worth it. So I have been looking forward to picking this one up. Next, maybe a little bit of a weird pick, but it's about a murderer, so I don't think it's that weird of a pick. No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. I've never read a Cormac McCarthy. I did really like this movie, and it's one of my boyfriend's favorite movies, so we have both been thinking of picking this one up and kind of seeing the original, especially because I know Cormac McCarthy is just so revered as a great American writer. I have an issue with most men American writers, so if you don't know what No Country for Old Men is, a regular degular man wanders upon a truck surrounded by a bunch of dead people and with a bunch of cash in the back. He gets in the car and basically sets off a chain of events, including many horrible things, mostly involving a serial killer. I think that I will enjoy something like this more than I will enjoy something like American Psycho, which kind of like reminds me of it. Similar vein, but is different. I think I'm gonna probably end up liking this one more. I'm intrigued to see what Cormac McCarthy has got in his pocket. I know it's fucking sad. I know just everything he writes is just so heartbreaking. So I like that kind of stuff, so maybe I'll like it. Second to last, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley. Yes, I've never read Frankenstein. I've tried like 3 or 4 times and I have not been able to get past the first chapter. And I know I just have to stick it out and actually get into it. But this is on the bottom of my list. I'm telling you this now. This will get read one day. It really will, one day. Is that day going to happen this year? Probably not. We'll see. Maybe all my books will burn down in the fire except for this one. So I'll have to read it. Last but not least, we have Death with Interruptions by Jose Saramago. I've heard a lot about Jose Saramago. Of all of the Latin American authors on this list, I'm probably going to end up liking this one the most. Except Borges. I think actually Borges I will probably end up liking the most, and then Saramago will probably come next, based off of just like what I know about their writing and things like that. On the first day of the new year, no one dies. This, of course, causes consternation among politicians, religious leaders, morticians, and doctors. Among the general public, on the other hand, there is initially celebration. Flags are hung out on balconies, people dance in the streets. They have achieved the great goal of humanity, eternal life. Then reality hits home. Families are left to care for the permanently dying. Life insurance policies become meaningless, and funeral parlors are reduced to arranging burials for pet dogs, cats, hamsters, and parrots. Death sits in her chilly apartment where she lives alone with a scythe, filing cabinets, and contemplates her experience. What if no one ever died again? What if she, death with a small d, became human and fell in love? This is definitely one of the ones that sounds the most interesting to me based off of plot alone. Not any of the context that I know about the book. I want to read that. Thank you for coming and joining me on this silly little thing that we do here on YouTube that I like to call hanging out. I know that makes me sound very friendless, but I have friends, okay? You're my friend. Like, comment, subscribe to potentially see me do these things. Thank you for keeping me company here at Natalie and Company. And I hope that you take care of yourself out there so that you can come back and keep me company once again. Bye.